The scent of garlic and rosemary filled our small Portland kitchen, a warm, savory cloud that I hoped would act as an anchor for the evening. It was our 5th anniversary, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was determined to make it perfect. Not just good, but perfect. The last few months with Mark had been distant. He was working late more often. His smile seemed a little tighter, and the easy laughter that once filled our home had been replaced by a quiet, persistent hum of unspoken tension. I told myself it was just stress from his new project at the architecture firm, but a small, cold knot of fear had taken root in my stomach. Tonight, I was going to banish it. I poured myself a glass of the expensive Cabernet I'd bought for the occasion, its deep red color swirling against the glass. On the stove, a creamy wild mushroom risotto simmered gently, each grain of arborio rice plump and pearlescent. In the oven, asparagus spears roasted with lemon and parmesan, their tips just beginning to crisp. I'd even baked a small, dense chocolate lava cake for dessert, his absolute favorite. I'd spent the entire day turning our home into a sanctuary, a bubble just for the two of us. I lit the candles on the dining table, their flames flickering and dancing, casting a soft, forgiving glow over the polished wood. I'd used the good china, the silver, the linen napkins we only brought out for Christmas. I smoothed down the front of my silk navy dress, the one he always said made my eyes look like the ocean at dusk. Everything was in its place, a carefully constructed stage for the love I was so desperate to reclaim. My sister, Jessica, had called earlier in the afternoon. "Big plans for the big night?" she'd asked, her voice light and breezy as always. "Just a quiet dinner at home," I'd replied, not wanting to reveal the extent of my efforts, not wanting it to sound as desperate as it felt. "That's nice," she'd said, though there was a strange, almost clipped tone to her words I couldn't quite place. "We'll have fun." Looking back, I should have paid more attention to that tone. I should have recognized the sound of a secret being kept, but I was too caught up in my own hopeful fantasy. I checked the clock on the wall. 7:15 p.m. Mark was due home any minute. My heart fluttered with a nervous energy that was equal parts excitement and dread. This had to work. This night had to be the turning point, the moment we found our way back to the easy, unshakable love we once shared. I took a sip of my wine, the rich liquid doing little to calm my nerves. I imagined his face when he walked in, the surprise, the smile that would finally, truly reach his eyes. I imagined him pulling me close, inhaling the scent of my perfume and the dinner I'd made just for him, and whispering, "This is perfect, Sarah." The thought was so vivid, I almost believed it had already happened. That's when my phone buzzed, shattering the quiet. It was him. I smiled, thinking he was calling from the driveway to tell me he was home. I answered, my voice already soft with affection. "Hey, you," I said, but the voice that came back wasn't warm or excited. It was flat, tired, and laced with an apology I already knew was a lie. "Hey, babe. Listen, something's come up." Mark's voice on the other end of the line was a carefully constructed performance of regret. I could picture him perfectly, running a hand through his dark hair, pinching the bridge of his nose as if burdened by the immense weight of his responsibilities. "I'm so sorry, but I'm going to be stuck at the office for a few more hours. We've hit a snag with the Benson project, and I can't leave until it's sorted." The carefully built fantasy of our perfect evening began to crumble, the edges fraying like old lace. My smile faltered. Crumble. I sank onto one of the dining chairs, the silk of my dress rustling against the wood. The flickering candlelight suddenly seemed mocking, illuminating a celebration for one. "Oh," I said, my voice small, "but it's our anniversary, Mark." I hated how weak I sounded, how my disappointment was a tangible thing I couldn't hide. "I know, Sarah, and I feel terrible. I swear I'll make it up to you this weekend. We'll do something special, I promise." The words were right, but the delivery was hollow. It was a script he had rehearsed, a generic apology for a generic inconvenience, not for missing the 5-year milestone of our life together. The aroma of rosemary and truffle, which had felt so warm and inviting just moments before, now felt cloying, suffocating. I made dinner," I whispered, staring at the risotto that was now in danger of becoming a stodgy, overcooked mass. The lava cakes are ready to go in the oven. There was a brief pause on his end, a beat of silence where I imagined he was trying to summon the appropriate level of remorse. I'm so sorry. Just, just go ahead and eat without me. Don't let it go to waste. It was a dismissal, plain and simple. He wanted the conversation to be over. He wanted me to accept his excuse and quietly hang up the phone so he could get back to his very important work. My heart ached with a familiar sting, the feeling of being a second priority, an afterthought. I was about to say, okay, to swallow my hurt and let him go, to be the understanding wife he expected me to be. I opened my mouth to form the word, but before I could, a sound from his end of the line cut through the sterile silence of his apology. It was a giggle, a soft, feminine, tinkling sound. It wasn't the boisterous laugh of a coworker or the polite chuckle of a client. It was intimate, familiar, a sound I had known my entire life. It was the laugh that had echoed through our childhood home, the laugh that had been at the center of every family gathering, the laugh that belonged to my sister, Jessica. My blood ran cold. The phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. The world tilted on its axis, and every small nagging suspicion I had pushed down for months rushed to the surface, screaming. The late nights, the clipped phone calls, the distance in his eyes. It wasn't stress. It wasn't a project. It was her. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice suddenly sharp, stripped of all its earlier softness. Mark stammered. "Wow, what? No one. It's just someone from the finance team down the hall." The lie was so clumsy, so transparent, it was almost insulting. He thought I was a fool. "It sounded like Jessica," I said, the name leaving a bitter taste on my tongue. "Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. Why would Jessica be at my office at this hour?" He scoffed, but his voice was tight with panic. And then I heard it again. This time a hushed whisper, her voice unmistakable, even muffled. "Is she still on the phone?" My world didn't just crack. It shattered into a million irreparable pieces. I hung up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the deafening silence, the phone lying on the table beside a perfectly cooked meal for a man who was dining on a feast of lies with my own sister. The silence in the apartment was a physical presence. It pressed in on me from all sides, heavier and more suffocating than any noise. The romantic dinner I had so lovingly crafted now felt like a cruel joke, a diorama of a happy marriage that didn't exist. The candles flickered, their light dancing over the two empty plates, the two unused wine glasses, the two pristine napkins folded into neat swans. A dinner for two ghosts. I stood up, my movements slow and robotic, and walked over to the stove. I turned off the heat under the risotto. I watched the creamy mixture settle into a thick, unappetizing paste. It was ruined, just like everything else. I began to walk through our home, the home I had believed was a sanctuary built for us. My hand trailed along the back of the sofa, where we used to cuddle and watch old movies. I touched the frame of a photo on the bookshelf. The two of us on our wedding day, beaming, impossibly young and full of a naive, unshakable faith in the word forever. Next to it was a picture of me and Jessica at her college graduation. I was looking at her with such pride, my arms slung around her shoulder. She was smiling, but now, looking at it through the lens of this new, horrifying truth, her smile looked different. It looked triumphant. Jessica, my younger sister, the golden child. While I was the quiet, responsible one, the one who got good grades and never caused any trouble, Jessica was the star. She was the one with the dazzling smile, the effortless charm, the one who could talk her way into or out of anything. Our parents had always doted on her, forgiving her missteps with a wave of the hand while holding me to an impossibly high standard. "You have to be the example for her, Sarah," they'd always say. And I was. I helped her with her homework, bailed her out when she spent her allowance too quickly, and listened for hours as she lamented her dramatic whirlwind romances. I had always been her rock, her confidant, her biggest supporter. And this is how she repaid me. The betrayal was a double-edged sword, each side honed to a razor's sharpness. Mark had broken his vows. But Jessica had broken something much more sacred. She had broken the unspoken pact of sisterhood, of family, of a shared history. She knew what this anniversary meant to me. I had told her just last week how worried I was, how much I was hoping to reconnect with Mark. She had listened, nodded sympathetically, and offered hollow words of encouragement, all while she was sleeping with my husband. The thought made me physically ill. I leaned against the wall, my head spinning. How long? How long had this been going on? The secretive phone calls, the boys' nights that I was never invited to, the times Jessica would cancel our plans at the last minute with a flimsy excuse. It all started to click into place, a horrifying mosaic of deceit. I thought back to Christmas, just a few months ago. Mark had given me a beautiful, delicate sapphire necklace. I had been so touched. But Jessica had received a new laptop from him, an expensive model. Just helping her out since she's starting her freelance career, he'd said with a casual shrug. At the time, I'd thought it was just him being generous. Now, it felt like a transaction, a down payment. My feet carried me to our bedroom. His side of the bed was neatly made. His clothes were in the closet, his scent still lingering on the pillow. It was a lie. This whole life was a lie. I wasn't a wife. I was a placeholder, a convenience, a cover story for the real romance happening behind my back. The anger finally broke through the shock, hot and clean. I wasn't just going to sit here and let them destroy me. I wasn't going to be the quiet, understanding victim they expected me to be. I grabbed my car keys from the bowl by the door. I knew where Jessica lived, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was going to see this lie with my own eyes. The drive to Jessica's apartment in the Pearl District was a blur of traffic lights and smeared rain on the windshield. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. My mind was a maelstrom of rage and grief, replaying that laugh, that whispered phrase, over and over again. With every passing block, a cold, hard clarity began to form. This wasn't a spontaneous act of passion. This was a calculated, long-term betrayal. They hadn't just stumbled into this. They had built it, nurtured it, and hidden it right under my nose, confident in my trust, in my naivete. I parked across the street from her building, a sleek, modern complex with large glass windows that seemed to promise a life of sophisticated ease. For a moment, I just sat there, the engine humming, watching her fourth-floor apartment. The lights were on, casting a warm, inviting glow into the damp night. My stomach twisted. How many of our anniversaries, our date nights, our quiet evenings had he spent here, in her light, while I waited in the dark? I didn't have a plan. In her light, I only had a burning need to confront them, to shatter the cozy little world they had built on the ruins of mine. I got out of the car and walked into the lobby. I still had a spare key to her apartment from years ago, from a time when we were inseparable, when the thought of her betraying me was as unimaginable as the sun rising in the west. My hand trembled as I slid the key into the lock of her apartment door. It turned with a sickeningly smooth click. I pushed the door open slowly. The apartment was a mirror of my own home's betrayal. A bottle of the same Cabernet I had opened sat on the counter, 2 glasses beside it, one with a faint smudge of lipstick on the rim. And there, thrown carelessly over the back of a chair, was Mark's blazer, the one he'd worn to work that morning. But the final, soul-crushing blow was what she was wearing. Jessica emerged from the bedroom, a startled look on her face. She was in one of Mark's old worn-in t-shirts, a gray one from his college days that I had loved, the one he wore on lazy Sunday mornings while we made pancakes. Seeing it on her, on my sister, in this context, felt like a physical violation. "Sarah? What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a weak attempt at surprise. She clutched the front of the shirt as if she could hide the truth printed on the fabric. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, my eyes taking in the scene, the wine, the blazer, the shirt. Every detail was a fresh stab of pain. "Where is he?" I finally asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Jessica's face hardened, the feigned innocence melting away to reveal the cold, defiant woman underneath. He went out to get food. He'll be back soon. She said it with a casualness that was designed to wound, to let me know this was their routine, their life. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was their normal. How could you? I whispered, the words feeling inadequate, flimsy against the sheer scale of her treachery. How could you do this to me, Jessica? She let out a short, bitter laugh. It wasn't the tinkling giggle I'd heard on the phone. This was something uglier. Oh, please, Sarah, don't act so surprised. You had to know this wasn't working. You and Mark have been miserable for months. We were not miserable, I shot back, my voice rising. We were going through a rough patch, something we could have fixed if my own sister hadn't been sleeping with my husband. He was tired of it, she snapped, taking a step forward. Tired of your schedules, your expectations, your constant need for everything to be so perfect. With me, it's easy, it's fun. He can finally breathe. Every word was a carefully chosen dart, aimed at my deepest insecurities. She wasn't just admitting to the affair. She was justifying it, framing me as the villain of the story, the boring, suffocating wife who drove him into her arms. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. She saw my stunned silence and pressed her advantage, her lips curling into a smug smirk. He loves me, Sarah. He was going to tell you. You just beat him to it. At that moment, I hated her more than I had ever hated anyone in my life. The love I had for my sister curdled into something dark and unrecognizable. She wasn't family. She was a stranger who wore my sister's face. I turned to leave, my mind made up. I wasn't going to stand here and trade insults with her. That's what she wanted. A screaming match. A dramatic scene. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. As I reached the door, I heard his key in the lock. The door swung open, and there stood Mark, holding 2 takeout containers. A sheepish smile on his face that vanished the second he saw me. Takeout containers. Mark froze in the doorway, the takeout containers dangling from his hand like props from a play that had just gone terribly wrong. His eyes darted from my face to Jessica's, then back to mine. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, guilty pallor. For a moment, the 3 of us were suspended in a tableau of silent horror: the cheating husband, the triumphant mistress, and the devastated wife. "Sarah!" he breathed, the name a panicked whisper. What are you doing here?" I let out a laugh, a dry, humorless sound that scraped my throat on its way out. "What am I doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing, Mark. I thought you were stuck at the office. The Benson project, wasn't it? Must have been a really tough meeting." My voice was dripping with a sarcasm so cold it could have frozen the air in the room. He winced, setting the food down on the small entryway table as if it burned his hands. He took a step toward me, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Look, Sarah, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted, my voice rising with an anger I no longer tried to contain. "Can you explain why you're here, with my sister, on our 5th wedding anniversary? Can you explain the wine, your blazer on her chair, the fact that she's wearing your shirt? Go on, Mark, explain it. I'm dying to hear the architectural principles behind this particular construction." Jessica, who had been watching from the sidelines with a look of smug satisfaction, decided to intervene. "Stop it, Sarah. You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" I whirled on her, my fury now directed at its primary target. "You are sleeping with my husband. You have been lying to my face for God knows how long, and you think I'm the one making a scene?" Mark stepped between us, trying to play the peacemaker in a war he had started. "Okay, both of you, just calm down. This is not how I wanted this to happen." "And how did you want it to happen, Mark?" I demanded. "Did you want to continue lying to me indefinitely? Were you going to come home tonight, kiss me goodnight, and then text her from our bed? Or were you going to finally work up the courage to tell me the truth, after you'd drained our joint savings account on romantic getaways for the 2 of you?" The mention of the savings account made him flinch. It was a guess, a shot in the dark, but his reaction told me I'd hit a bullseye. His silence was the only confession I needed. "This isn't about you anymore, Sarah," he said, his voice taking on a defensive, blaming tone. It was a classic move, the cheater's pivot. You pushed me away. You've been so wrapped up in your work, in making everything perfect. You never stopped to ask what I wanted. I felt like I was suffocating. Suffocating? I was incredulous. I supported you through every late night, every stressful project. I built my life around yours. My work paid for the down payment on our house. A house you're probably planning on selling so you two can start your shiny new life together. It wouldn't have come to this if you had just paid attention, he yelled, his voice cracking. He was cornered, and like a trapped animal, he was lashing out. Jessica understands me. She listens to me. With her, I don't have to be perfect. I looked from his desperate, contorted face to my sister's, which was set in a mask of cold indifference. In that moment, I saw them for what they were. Two weak, selfish people who had found solace in their shared mediocrity. They weren't star-crossed lovers in some grand, tragic romance. They were just pathetic. I was done. The anger that had propelled me here evaporated, leaving behind a vast, empty coldness. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to fight for. The man I married was gone, and the sister I loved had never really existed. The man I married— You're right, I said, my voice eerily calm. The sudden shift in my tone caught them both off guard. You don't have to be perfect. I looked Mark dead in the eye. In fact, you don't have to be anything to me at all anymore. I turned and walked out the door, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their sordid little affair. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The image of them together, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal, was burned into my memory forever. The war wasn't over, but that battle was. And I had just walked away the victor, because I was the one who was finally free. The drive home was an out-of-body experience. The city lights blurred into long, watery streaks, and the sound of the tires on the wet pavement was the only thing grounding me to reality. When I walked back into my apartment, the scent of the anniversary dinner hit me like a physical blow. The risotto, the asparagus, the unbaked lava cakes, it was all still there. A testament to a future that had been stolen from me in the span of a single phone call. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. A strange glacial calm had settled over me. I walked through the house, my house, and began to see everything with new, unclouded eyes. The photographs on the wall, the books on the shelves, the throw blanket on the couch, they were no longer symbols of a shared life, but artifacts from a lie. I went straight to my laptop and pulled up our joint savings account, the one we had been diligently contributing to for a future dream home, as Mark had called it. My hands were steady as I typed in the password. The page loaded, and the numbers on the screen confirmed my worst fears. It wasn't just a guess anymore. It was a fact, laid out in cold, hard digital ink. There were dozens of transactions I didn't recognize. A charge for a weekend at a boutique hotel on the coast from 2 months ago, a time Mark had claimed he was at a work conference. Multiple expensive dinners at restaurants he'd told me were overrated. A significant withdrawal from a jewelry store in a town near Jessica's old college campus. The dates aligned perfectly with every late night, every business trip, every flimsy excuse. They had been funding their affair with our future, our money, my money, the money I had worked tirelessly for, saving every extra dollar, believing we were building something together. The knot of coldness in my stomach tightened into a knot of pure, unadulterated rage. He hadn't just cheated on me, he had stolen from me. He and my sister had laughed behind my back while they spent the money I earned on their secret life. This wasn't just a betrayal of the heart, it was a calculated financial deception. They had treated me like a bank, a funding source for their sordid little romance. And they had assumed I would never find out, or that if I did, I would be too heartbroken, too weak to do anything about it. They underestimated me. That was their first mistake. I spent the rest of the night meticulously documenting everything. I took screenshots of the bank statements. I cross-referenced the dates with my calendar and Mark's supposed work schedule. I found old credit card bills and highlighted every suspicious charge. I was no longer a grieving wife. I was an auditor, a detective, building a case against the two people I had trusted most in the world. By the time the sun began to cast a pale gray light into the living room, I had a folder thick with evidence. My grief hadn't vanished, but it had been forged into something else, a sharp, clear sense of purpose. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I wasn't going to walk away with nothing while they built their new life on the foundations of my hard work and broken heart. I showered, dressed in my most severe black pantsuit, and made a pot of coffee. As I drank it, standing in the kitchen and looking out at the waking city, a plan began to form. It was audacious, it was ruthless, and it was exactly what they deserved. It was audacious. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would be a victim. But they had forgotten who I was before I became a wife and a sister. I was a fighter, and I was about to remind them. I made one phone call that morning, not to my parents, not to a friend, but to a name I'd gotten from a colleague a year ago after she'd gone through a nasty divorce. Eleanor Vance, a family law attorney known for being as sharp as she was. Relentless. Ms. Vance, I said when her assistant put me through. My name is Sarah Miller. I need to schedule an appointment as soon as possible. I believe my husband has been engaging in fraudulent activity with our marital assets. Eleanor Vance's office was on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper with a panoramic view of the city that seemed to suggest a certain level of power and perspective. The office itself was minimalist and modern: glass, steel, and a single vibrant orchid on her desk. Eleanor was a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I found instantly reassuring. She didn't offer condolences or platitudes. She offered a legal pad and a pen. "Start from the beginning," she said, her voice calm and direct. And so I did. I laid out the whole sordid story, not with tears, but with a cold, methodical precision. The anniversary dinner, the phone call, the laugh, the confrontation at my sister's apartment. Then I opened the folder I had prepared and spread the evidence across her polished desk. The bank statements with highlighted transactions, the screenshots, the calendar dates that exposed his lies. I presented my case like a prosecutor, my voice even and steady. Eleanor listened intently, her eyes scanning the documents, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers, regarding me for a long moment. "They didn't just betray you, Mrs. Miller," she said finally. "They committed financial fraud against the marital estate. This isn't just about adultery. This is about theft." The validation in her words was like a balm on my raw nerves. I wasn't being overly dramatic. I wasn't crazy. I was a victim of a calculated deception. "What do we do?" I asked. Eleanor's lips curved into a faint, confident smile. "First, we freeze the assets. I'll file an emergency motion with the court this afternoon to put an immediate hold on all joint accounts. He won't be able to withdraw another cent. Second, we file for divorce, citing both adultery and dissipation of marital assets. We will subpoena his and your sister's phone records and credit card statements to prove the extent and duration of the affair and the financial misconduct." She laid out the strategy with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating. We were going on the offensive. "He will likely try to claim the house as his, especially if his name is primarily on the mortgage," she continued. "But Oregon is an equitable distribution state. Your financial contributions, even indirect ones, matter. The down payment you mentioned, the renovations you paid for, we will document it all. They wanted a new life together? Fine. They can start it from scratch, without your money." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't alone. I had an ally, a formidable one. I left Eleanor's office feeling not healed, but armed. The grief was still there, a dull ache deep in my chest, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful sense of resolve. That afternoon, as promised, Eleanor filed the motion. I pictured Mark's face when he would try to use his debit card and find it declined. I imagined the panicked phone call he would make to Jessica, the first real crack in their perfect stolen fantasy. The thought brought a grim, satisfying smile to my face. I went home and began to pack. Not everything, just the things that were truly mine. My books, my clothes, the photograph of my grandparents, the small, chipped mug I drank my morning tea from. I systematically erased myself from the life we had built, leaving behind the shell of a home filled with his lies. As I was packing a box of kitchen supplies, my phone buzzed. It was Mark. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text appeared. My card was just declined. "What did you do, Sarah?" I stared at the message, a wave of cold power washing over me. I typed a single, simple reply. I hired a lawyer. I didn't need to say anything more. I knew, in that moment, that he finally understood. The game had changed. I was no longer a pawn in his and Jessica's story. I was the one controlling the board. The quiet, understanding wife was gone. In her place was a woman who was about to take back everything they had stolen, and then some. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal paperwork, mediations, and the slow, painful process of disentangling my life from Mark's. He and Jessica fought back, of course. They hired a lawyer who tried to paint me as a vindictive, money-hungry spouse. They claimed the expenditures were joint decisions, and the affair was a recent mistake brought on by my emotional neglect. But Eleanor was relentless. She presented the mountain of evidence: the hotel receipts, the jewelry purchases, the phone records that showed thousands of calls and texts between them, stretching back over a year. Their lies crumbled under the weight of an undeniable truth. The court froze all their assets, and the financial pressure began to work its magic. Their stolen fantasy, built on my money and their deceit, couldn't survive the harsh light of reality. I found a small sunlit apartment downtown, a place that was entirely my own. I filled it with new furniture, new plants, and the quiet promise of a new beginning. I started painting again, a hobby I had let fall by the wayside amidst the demands of my marriage. I reconnected with old friends who had been pushed to the periphery of my life with Mark. Slowly, piece by piece, I was building a life that belonged only to me. One Saturday morning, about 2 months after I had left, I was at a local farmer's market, enjoying the simple pleasure of picking out fresh flowers. I saw them across the crowded square. Mark and Jessica. They weren't holding hands or smiling. They were arguing. Their faces were tense, their gestures sharp and angry. Jessica was gesturing wildly at her phone, and Mark was shaking his head, his shoulders slumped in defeat. They looked miserable. The easy fun they had boasted about was gone, replaced by the ugly reality of consequences. The stolen weekends and secret dinners were one thing. Facing a future with depleted funds and a looming legal battle was another entirely. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel hatred. I felt a profound and startling sense of pity. They had destroyed so much, including themselves, for something so fleeting and ultimately hollow. I turned away and continued shopping, the incident already fading from my mind. The final settlement was more than fair. I was awarded a significant portion of the home's equity, reimbursement for the money they had spent from our savings, and our shared investments were divided in my favor due to his proven financial misconduct. The house had to be sold to cover the settlement. Their dream home, the one they planned to build on the ashes of our marriage, was liquidated before they could even move in. The last I heard, through a mutual acquaintance, they had broken up. The pressure had been too much. Jessica had moved to another state, and Mark was living in a small rental, trying to rebuild his career and his finances. My own parents, when they finally learned the full story, were heartbroken and ashamed. My relationship with them is still strained, but we are slowly, cautiously, trying to find a new path forward. It's not about forgiveness, not yet. It's about understanding. It's not tonight, a year after that fateful anniversary, I am hosting a small dinner party in my own apartment. My friends are here, their laughter filling the space. The air smells of roasted chicken and fresh bread. I look around at the life I have built for myself, a life of honesty, resilience, and quiet joy. I didn't get revenge by screaming or fighting in the street. My revenge was my silence, my strategy, my success. It was in refusing to be the victim they tried to make me. It was in taking back my power, my finances, and my future. They thought they were taking everything from me, but in the end, they only took each other. And that, I've come to realize, was a punishment far greater than any I could have devised. They were left with the wreckage they created, while I was left with a clean slate and the beautiful, limitless promise of a life that was finally, truly my own.